The man was about to shoot his dog. Not out of rage, out of mercy. The beast had been limping for miles, ribs sharp beneath matted fur, eyes pleading for sleep he wouldn't wake from. But just as Mitchell Williamson pulled the hammer back, he heard it. A knock. 3 raps. Hesitant. Wrong for a storm. Too soft for a man with a debt. Too firm for a stranger with good news. He turned. 2 girls stood at his gate, barefoot, blue-lipped. The older one gripped her sister's hand like she'd never let go, even in the grave. She didn't cry. She just said, "Our mama died this morning." Then she looked him square in the eye. "We got nowhere to go." Behind him, the wind howled. The dog whimpered. The fire inside the cabin snapped once, like it, too, was waiting for his answer. He should have shut the door. Instead, he whispered, "Then you're already home. Before we begin, we'd love for you to watch the story closely, and by the end, rate out of 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us understand the kind of stories you enjoy, and it guides us in creating even better content for you." Mitchell didn't speak again as he stepped aside. The girls hesitated. The younger one's eyes flicked to the fire inside, then back to the snow behind. She looked ready to run. Mitchell crouched, held out a calloused hand. Not to grab, just open. They moved like fawns, the older guiding the younger over the threshold. The warmth inside hit them like a whisper. Mitchell stoked the hearth, watching their reflections in the glass. One trembling, one rigid. "What's your names?" he asked without turning. "Junie," the older said. "Joel," the little one squeaked. "All right," he replied. He didn't ask about their mother. He didn't have to. He'd seen frostbite on their toes, dried blood on Joel's knee. The hollow way Junie didn't blink. Outside, the storm tightened its grip. Inside, a man who hadn't let anyone in for 5 years poured 2 bowls of leftover stew, and didn't know it. But somewhere deep in his chest, something cold had started to melt. The stew was thin, but warm enough to feel like hope. Mitchell ladled it without ceremony, set it on the floor near the hearth. Joel stared like it might vanish. "It's not poisoned," Mitchell muttered. She slurped loud, eyes wide. Junie ate quieter, gaze locked on the flames. Mitchell sat in his crooked rocking chair and didn't speak. Buck, the old hound, limped over, flopped beside the girls. Joel buried her face in his fur. "She likes dogs," Junie whispered. Mitchell nodded but didn't smile. He couldn't. Smiling had been buried with Mara long ago. The girls sat cross-legged, bowls clutched like treasure. He watched them, not as a caretaker, but as a man trying to remember what human warmth even looked like. Fire crackled. Wind clawed at the walls. But inside, for the first time in years, there were 3 mouths fed, 3 souls still breathing. Mitchell didn't believe in fate, but he did believe in choices, and he'd just made one. The wind screamed all night, like it had something to say. Joel slept curled against Buck, Junie stiff beside her, eyes half open like a soldier guarding the dark. Mitchell sat by the window with the shotgun in his lap. Snow lashed sideways, branches thrashed against the cabin, and then he saw them, tracks. Fresh, human, deep near the fence line. He bolted the door, slow but certain. Junie didn't flinch. "Someone coming?" she asked. "Don't know," he answered. She nodded like it made no difference. Joel mumbled in her sleep. "Mama used to sing when it got this cold." Mitchell didn't reply. He just stared into the storm. When they finally slept, it wasn't peaceful. It was survival. And somewhere out there, someone had been close enough to watch. Mitchell didn't need to know who. Not yet. But in his gut, he knew they'd be back. And next time, they might not knock. By dawn, the tracks had vanished under fresh snow. But Mitchell knew what he saw. He saddled up, coat thick, breath steaming. Buck followed. They reached the gate and found it, nailed with rusted iron. A note. "Not your kids. Not your problem. Send them back, or we will." Mitchell didn't curse. Just read it twice. Folded it into his coat pocket. He didn't tear it. Didn't throw it. just carried it like a weight he was willing to bear. Inside, Junie was sewing Joel's socks, her hand steady like she'd done it forever. "You got enemies?" she asked without looking up. Mitchell shrugged. "Don't need enemies. Just neighbors who talk too much." She nodded again, calm, like this world had never been kind to her anyway. Joel giggled, chasing dust with a broom. Mitchell watched her and realized something terrifying. He wanted them to stay. And that meant he'd have to fight. Not just the cold, but the town. Joel was humming again, soft and off-key, a tune only she knew. Junie swept the floor in circles, pretending to be a queen, her sister her handmaid. Mitchell watched them like a man seeing ghosts, something familiar but unreachable. He didn't dare stop them. Then came the knock. 5 sharp raps. Not friendly, not begging, just deliberate. Mitchell grabbed the shotgun and opened the door just enough. A man stood there. Broad hat, council badge, smile like a blade. "Williamson," he said. "Heard you're keeping strays." Mitchell stepped outside, shut the door behind him. "They're not strays. They're children. Town votes tomorrow. Some think they belong elsewhere." Mitchell's grip on the shotgun tightened. "Then tell some to come say it to me." The man tipped his hat, half amused. "You know how this ends." Mitchell's voice was steel. "Only if I let it." Inside, Joel peeked through the curtain. Junie joined her. For the first time, both saw the war at their doorstep. Mitchell didn't sleep that night. He sat by the fire, shotgun leaning against the wall, watching shadows shift under the window crack. Joel stirred once in her sleep, clutching Buck's fur. Junie lay still, but her fingers curled into fists. Morning came with brittle light. Snow had stopped, but the cold remained sharp as a blade. Mitchell stepped outside. A boot print, fresh, marked the mud near the well. Whoever left it wanted to be seen. He poured feed for the chickens, checked the barn, then chopped wood like he was splitting judgment in half. Inside, Junie made tea with pine needles. Joel wore one of Mitchell's old flannels like a dress. "Are we staying?" she asked. Mitchell paused, then nodded. "Long as you want." Junie didn't smile. She just exhaled, like she'd been holding her breath for days. That night, when the wind returned, the girls didn't flinch. And for the first time, neither did Mitchell. He knew a storm would come. He was ready. Word spread faster than fire on dry brush. By noon, the blacksmith squinted at Mitchell on Main Street. By dusk, whispers trailed him like smoke. He walked into the general store for salt and lamp oil. The room went quiet. Clyde Ferris leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "How long till they start calling you Daddy Mitch?" Mitchell didn't answer, just paid and left. Outside, the sky bruised with storm clouds. Back at the cabin, Junie had fixed a broken chair leg with a strip of leather and twine. Joel had made a crown of twigs and wore it proudly. Mitchell stepped inside, hung his coat, and said nothing about town. But he noticed Joel's thumb bandaged fresh. "Cut it on the kettle," Junie explained. Mitchell nodded, fetched a cleaner wrap from the drawer, and rewrapped it slowly. Gently. "Mama used to tie it like that," Joel whispered. Mitchell didn't reply. He just poured hot water into their tin cups. Silence carried more than words ever could. Night fell hard. Cold returned with a growl in its gut. Mitchell sat on the rocker, carving wood. His knife moved with steady rhythm. A small bird began to take shape. Joel whispered stories near the fire about their mama, how she used to hum while sewing, how she called Junie her iron spine. Junie stayed quiet, eyes on the flames. When the wind whistled under the door, Mitchell stood, checked the latch, then returned to carving. "Why are people mad at us?" Joel asked. Mitchell paused. "Some folks don't like what they don't understand." "But we ain't done nothing." "Exactly," he said. Joel leaned against Buck, eyes heavy. "That's the part that scares them." He looked toward the window. Somewhere beyond the hills, men were waiting, not with guns yet, but with opinions sharper than steel. He couldn't stop them from coming, but he could decide what they'd find when they arrived. And what they'd find was a man who'd already made up his mind. Snow returned just before dawn, soft, like ash falling from heaven. Mitchell rose early, split kindling, then stepped out to feed the hound and check the barn. In the hayloft, he found something that made his jaw tighten. A boot print, smaller than his. Fresh. Someone had been inside while they slept. He didn't tell the girls. Just boarded the loft door and sat on the porch cleaning his rifle. Inside, Junie braided Joel's hair, singing softly. Mitchell watched them, then stood and nailed a board across the back gate. The wind was picking up again. Storm was close. Not just in the sky. In town. In men. Joel brought him a rock, shaped like a heart. "It's for the sill," she beamed. "For luck." He placed it there without a word. But something settled in his chest. Something solid. That night, he slept in the rocker, rifle beside him, boots still on. Some storms knock. Others don't. Mitchell was ready for both. The letter came folded and stiff, sealed in red wax. Joel found it on the porch beside the water pail. "It smells like soap and lies," she said. Mitchell opened it without blinking. Town council vote. The girls would be relocated by week's end to a proper, moral household. He read it twice, then a third time. Junie sat on the floor, stringing twigs into stars. Joel practiced stitching on an old cloth. Mitchell didn't tell them yet. Instead, he walked to the outhouse, nailed the letter to the inside of the door, and left it there to rot. At dinner, Junie asked, "What's relocate mean?" Mitchell said, "It means some folks think they know what's best." Joel frowned, "But we're already safe." "I know," he replied. That night, he carved a pair of tiny boots from pine and set them beside the wooden bird on the mantel. He didn't believe in luck, but he believed in symbols, and symbols had a way of standing their ground. Reverend Thatch arrived unannounced. He stood outside the fence with frost on his collar and fire in his eyes. Mitchell met him halfway, coat unbuttoned, rifle slung but unloaded. "You know why I'm here," the Reverend said. Mitchell nodded. "Because men fear what don't fit in their boxes." "This ain't about fear," Thatch replied. "It's about decency, about what's proper." Mitchell stared back, unmoved. Proper didn't feed him. Proper didn't open the door. They need a mother, not a grieving ranch hand. Mitchell's voice dropped. "They need safety, and I ain't a skin your permission to give it." Thatch's lips thinned. "Vote passed. Relocation starts in 2 days." Mitchell didn't blink. "You tell the council, come try." As the Reverend turned to leave, Joel peeked through the curtain. "Who's that?" she whispered. "Someone who thinks paper carries more weight than people," Mitchell muttered. That night, he sat at the hearth and sharpened his axe. Not for show, for whatever came next. The girls sensed it. Junie stopped humming. Joel stopped drawing. They moved quieter, watched Mitchell more closely. That night, Junie whispered, "You'll fight him, won't you?" Mitchell didn't answer immediately. "I'll do what's needed," he said at last. Joel whispered, "We'll help." Mitchell looked at them. 2 scraps of life clinging to warmth in a frozen world, and something inside him cracked. Not weakness. Resolve. The next morning, he split wood before the sun rose, cleared snow from the porch, nailed another board across the gate. Buck followed him everywhere, limping but alert. Around noon, Nora Thatch came, bonnet low, eyes ringed with worry. She held out a loaf of bread and a jar of stitching thread. "I had to come," she said. "I had to see them." Mitchell stepped aside. Nora knelt near Joel, brushing her tangled hair gently. "They're healing," she whispered. "You just can't see where." Mitchell stood silent. For the first time, the cabin didn't feel like a place he survived in. It felt like home. Joel ripped her dress that evening. It snagged on a nail by the mantel, tearing the fabric nearly in half. She froze, staring at the tear like it had torn her heart with it. "It was the only pretty thing I had," she whispered. I ruined it. Junie rushed to her side, but Joel shrugged her off. Mitchell watched from his chair, heart thudding. He didn't know how to fix a child's tears, but he knew how to fix things. He knelt down. Let me try. You sew. Joel sniffed. Not well, but I'll be careful. He found Mara's old sewing kit beneath the floorboards. Dusty, rusted, still whole. The girl sat beside him in silence as he threaded the needle with thick fingers, squinting against the firelight. The dress came together slowly, crooked, imperfect, but stitched with care. When he tied off the thread, Joel touched the seam like it was gold. It's better than before, she whispered. Mitchell didn't reply, but his hand shook a little. The blizzard came that night, sudden and brutal. Wind slammed the walls. Snow swept past the windows like a wave of ghosts. Joel wore the mended dress to bed. Mitchell stoked the fire high. We'll have to bring the animals in, he said. Junie was already pulling on her boots. We'll help, she said. Only if you wear socks, he replied. She grinned. Together, they wrestled the barn door open, lantern swinging, snow biting every inch of exposed skin. The animals shifted nervously. Joel whispered to the goats while Junie held the lantern. Mitchell shoveled a path with fierce precision. Back inside, Joel's hands were near frozen. He wrapped them in flannel. Junie made pine needle tea. They huddled together, silent, waiting out the howl of the wind. Then a knock. 3 loud thuds against the door. Mitchell stood slowly. The girls tensed. The knock came again. Firmer. Measured. Not just the wind this time. Someone was outside, trying to test their resolve. Mitchell opened the door an inch. Outside stood Reverend Thatch, snow crusting his collar. Beside him, Clyde Ferris held a lantern. Old Man Cutler lingered behind them. We heard the storm hit hard, Thatch said. Thought you might need checking on. We're fine, Mitchell answered flatly. You've got children inside. The town's concerned. They're warm. They're safe. Safe ain't what folks are saying. Mitchell's grip tightened on the doorframe. Then folks should look in their own windows. Thatch's voice dropped. This ain't just about you. It's about what's right. Mitchell stepped forward. Kindness is what's right. Decency's what's right. And neither of those ever knocked on my door till now. Behind him, Joel appeared, wearing the mended dress. He fixed it, she said quietly. He saved it. Clyde scoffed. Shouldn't be here. Thatch's jaw tightened. Storm or not, this'll need answering. Mitchell didn't flinch. Then come back when the storm's done. I'll still be here. And he closed the door like a line in the snow. Inside, the fire hissed. Snow crackled at the windows, and the air felt heavier than the walls could hold. Joel stared at the door. Are they gone? Mitchell nodded. For now. He sat back down and picked up the carving knife. The bird he had started now had wings. He set it above the mantel beside the boots. Junie whispered, They'll come back, won't they? They will. You still gonna keep us? I said you're home. I meant it. Joel smiled faintly and returned to the hearth, where she painted stones with berry juice. Junie watched Mitchell closely. Why do you do it? She asked. Ain't your job. Mitchell leaned forward. Some folks walk by when they see pain. Some stop and hold it. I guess I'm done walking. Outside, the storm roared louder. But inside, nothing moved Mitchell from that chair. He carved through it all. Through the judgment, the noise, the threats. Because he'd already decided these girls weren't going anywhere. The next morning came with blue skies and frozen silence. Ice clung to branches like glass. Mitchell stepped outside with the axe, splitting logs while Buck guarded the path. The tracks from last night had vanished, but the tension hadn't. Inside, the girls folded blankets and sang softly. Mitchell returned with arms full of wood and something sharper than frost in his chest. He poured oats into the kettle. Joel offered to stir. Junie set the table with care. We could help more, she said. We're not just guests. Mitchell paused, then nodded. All right, you'll feed the hens tomorrow. The warmth in Junie's smile threatened to thaw the walls. They ate quietly, but it wasn't heavy. It was calm, real. Later, as Joel tied a ribbon around her wrist, Mitchell caught sight of something out the window. A figure, standing at the ridge, watching, not moving. He reached for the rifle, then stopped. Whoever it was, they weren't lost. They were waiting. That night, Mitchell kept the rifle near. Not for the girls to see, but close. The figure on the ridge hadn't returned, but something in Mitchell's bones said it wasn't over. Junie noticed his tension. You scared? She asked. I've been scared before. This ain't that. What is it? It's knowing what's coming. After the girls slept, he sat on the porch, moonlight dusting the snow like ash. Buck lay at his feet. In the trees, an owl called once, then went quiet. He saw movement near the barn, quick, then gone. A test. Not a threat yet. Just pressure. Mitchell didn't move. He let them watch. Let them wonder. Because sometimes, showing no fear is louder than bullets. Back inside, he added a log to the fire and glanced at the boots on the mantel. Two small things carved by a man who never asked to become a father, but now might die as one. And for the first time, he didn't mind the idea. Nora came again. Quiet this time. Alone. Her bonnet hung down her back, cheeks raw from wind. She didn't knock, just stepped to the porch like she belonged. Mitchell opened the door before she reached it. They sent another letter, she said, holding out the folded paper. Tomorrow. They're coming with wagons. He took the note, didn't open it. They'll bring men, she warned. Counsel. Even my father. Let them. Mitchell, you can't win this alone. He looked over his shoulder. Inside, Joel was braiding Junie's hair. I'm not alone. Nora's voice softened. What if I stood with you? Mitchell's eyes met hers. It'll ruin your name. I'd rather lose a name than watch them lose another home. She stepped forward, fingers brushing his. We don't have to marry, but we could be family. Mitchell nodded once, slow. The decision was made. Not out of desperation. Out of something truer. Love built in silence, forged in snow. Tomorrow they'd come, and they'd find them standing together. The dawn came slow and gray, like the sky itself didn't want to witness what was about to happen. Mitchell didn't speak much. He packed jerky in a bag, filled canteens, checked the rifle twice. Nora helped the girls into clean dresses. Joel's braid was crooked. Junie adjusted it gently. Will it hurt? Joel asked. Junie shook her head. Not if we stay close. Outside, wagon wheels crunched over frostbitten dirt. 7 men. 3 wagons. Clyde Ferris. Reverend Thatch. Councilmen with ledgers in hand like law written in ink carried more weight than truth written in scars. Mitchell stepped onto the porch. You here for a fight? We're here for what's lawful, Thatch replied. Then you best be prepared for both. Joel gripped Junie's hand tighter. Nora stood behind them, silent, steady. And for a moment, even the cold held its breath. Mitchell's voice cut through the stillness. If you want him, you'll have to go through me. And no one moved. Clyde Ferris stepped forward first, boots heavy, lips curled in disdain. This don't gotta be hard, Mitch. We take the girls. You keep your land. No trouble. Mitchell didn't move. And if I say no, then we take him anyway. And you'll lose more than land. Joel's grip on Mitchell's coat tightened. Junie stared at Clyde, like she could burn him with her silence. Reverend Thatch cleared his throat. You're a man of pride, Mitchell. Don't turn that into folly. I'm a man of promises, he said, and I made one to them. They're not yours. They didn't need to be. They chose me. The men shifted, uncertain. Councilman Cutler looked at Nora. You part of this now. She stepped forward. He's not their father, but he's the only one who stayed when the world left. Thatch's voice cracked with anger. You'll regret this. Mitchell locked eyes with him. Not 1 second of it. The line had been drawn. In snow. In silence. In blood if needed. Tension rippled like heat off a blacktop. One of the hired men, a younger one, clean-shaven and nervous, looked to Clyde. "They got kids with them," he muttered. "Ain't right." Clyde growled. "You here to talk or to work?" But the man stepped back. "Ain't what I signed up for." Cutler hesitated, too. His gaze fell to Joel's, small hand gripping Mitchell's. "They look like they belong," he said. Reverend Thatch raised his voice. "This isn't about feelings. It's about law. About order." Mitchell took 1 step forward. "Law without heart is just control." "And what about sin?" Thatch spat. "You call this pure? I call this survival." Junie stepped forward, jaw tight. "We didn't ask to be born into pain, but we found someone who stayed. Ain't that worth more than papers?" Even Clyde fell silent. The hired men stepped back. One by one, the council's grip began to loosen. Mitchell stood tall. His stance didn't waver. He had already chosen which side of history he'd stand on. The cold wind whipped through the standoff, tugging at coats and hats, stirring the silence like a spoon in hot broth. Nora stepped closer to Mitchell, her gloved hand brushing his arm. "You sure?" she whispered. "Never been more." Clyde scowled. "You marry her. You think that makes this whole?" Mitchell's voice was low, controlled. "Makes it real." Reverend Thatch barked. "This is scandal. A rancher playing house with orphans and a desperate woman." Nora didn't flinch. "Better than a church that preaches mercy and shows none." Thatch turned red. "You'll burn for this." "Then I'll keep the fire warm," Mitchell snapped. Joel whispered, "Why are they so mad?" Junie answered before anyone else could. "Because we're not broken the way they want us to be." Mitchell looked around. No more wagons approached. No more men advanced. The worst they had, they'd already thrown at him. And he was still standing. Because for once, someone had chosen not to leave. They didn't take the girls. Not that day. Not with the eyes of a town staring from behind fences and porch rails. Not with whispers being outmatched by truth spoken out loud. They turned. Slowly. Bitterly. Like dogs denied the bone they'd circled for too long. Clyde was the last to leave, spitting into the snow. "This ain't over." Mitchell said nothing. He didn't need to. The girls were still beside him. Nora still stood behind him. That was enough. When the last wagon disappeared beyond the ridge, Joel let go of Mitchell's hand and collapsed into Junie's arms. She didn't cry. She just breathed like she hadn't since their mama died. Inside, the fire crackled. Nora helped the girls out of their coats. Mitchell sat down and removed his boots slowly, fingers trembling. Not from cold, from something deeper. Relief. He had stood when it mattered, and he'd learned that standing for someone else might just save you too. The quiet inside the cabin was almost holy. Joel curled beside Buck. Junie wiped her eyes and stared into the fire. Nora moved about the kitchen, making tea. Mitchell sat at the table, head bowed over his hands. "You did it," Nora said softly. "You stood your ground." He shook his head. "We did it." She sat across from him. "They'll come again." "I know. Next time might be worse." "Then we'll be ready." She nodded, then reached out, hand brushing his. It wasn't romance. It was anchor. Later, Mitchell hung the boots back above the mantel and added a third carving beside them, a small heart, whittled from pine, rough but full. Joel woke and saw it first. "It's us," she whispered. "You. Junie, me." "That's right," Mitchell said. Junie asked, "Where we now?" Mitchell looked at them, voice low and steady. "We're family. That's what we are." Outside, snow began to fall again. But this time, it wasn't trying to bury them, just cover them gently. 3 days passed without visitors. Just wind and chores and a calm that felt earned. Mitchell taught Junie how to grip an axe properly. Joel learned to feed the hens without spilling half the grain. Nora mended the chimney flue. It felt simple. It felt right. At dusk, they all sat by the fire. Joel painted another rock, this one shaped like a star. Junie read aloud from a weathered book Mitchell hadn't touched in years. Nora watched the flames, humming a hymn too quiet for memory. Then came the sound. Not hooves. Not footsteps. Wheels. A single wagon. Mitchell rose and stepped outside. One man. Dismounted. Alone. Reverend Thatch. No counsel. No muscle. Mitchell said. Just me. The Reverend replied. Why? Because I was wrong. Mitchell didn't speak. You showed more church than I ever preached, Thatch admitted. They'll still talk. They'll still fight you. Let 'em, Mitchell said. We'll be too busy living. And for once, the Reverend had no argument left to make. Reverend Thatch left a loaf of bread and a sealed letter. Inside it was a simple note. Let no man tear apart what mercy has built. Mitchell didn't say much about it, just nodded and tucked the letter inside Mara's Bible, where the pages still smelled of ash and lavender. Nora sat beside him that night on the porch, sipping tea from a tin mug. You reckon they'll leave us alone now? She asked. Not likely. Then what now? Mitchell smiled faintly. Now we keep living, day by day. The girls danced inside to the sound of Junie's humming, their bare feet light against the old wooden floor. Mitchell watched them, heart full in a way he'd forgotten possible. They saved me, he muttered. Nora turned. You saved them. Maybe we saved each other, he said. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and for the first time, Mitchell closed his eyes without fear. The world outside might never understand them, but they had enough understanding inside these walls. The snow thawed slow. Cracks appeared in the ice along the creek. Birds returned, skittish but curious. Spring didn't arrive in full. It tiptoed in. Junie built scarecrows for the garden. Joel named the goats after stars. Mitchell patched the fence line with care he'd never given his own roof. The days grew longer. At town, folks stared less. Nora walked beside Mitchell in broad daylight. Nobody threw words anymore. Just glances. And he let them glance. What mattered lived back at the cabin. 2 girls who sang louder each week, and a woman who stitched belonging into every corner of his home. One evening, Mitchell sat on the porch and carved again. Not boots. Not birds. This time, a little cabin with a crooked chimney. Joel saw it first. Is that us? He nodded. Always will be. The girls beamed. Nora kissed his temple. And for the first time since winter fell, Mitchell let himself believe they were going to be just fine. The cabin smelled of stew and smoke. Joel's laughter echoed off the walls as Junie chased her with a wooden spoon. Mitchell sat at the table, cleaning his rifle, not out of fear, just habit. Nora arranged dried herbs near the window. It felt like a life. Not a temporary stop, not a hiding place. A home. Then came a knock, gentle, unexpected. Mitchell answered, cautious. A woman stood there, shawl pulled tight, eyes wet. I heard what you did, she said. My boy's gone. Fever took him. I've got no one. Mitchell looked back into the house, at laughter, warmth, the fire burning bright. You hungry? He asked. She nodded. He stepped aside. That night, one more plate was set, and as the fire burned lower, Joel whispered, We can share our bed. Junie nodded. Mitchell didn't speak. He just carved another boot, this one small, new, and placed it gently on the mantel beside the others. Some families are born. Others open their doors and become one. The mantel now held 4 boots, each carved different, each placed in a perfect line. Mitchell stared at them that night, quiet, still, full. Behind him, Nora braided Joel's hair as Junie read aloud from a journal they were writing together. The new woman, Ruth, slept in the rocker, wrapped in warmth she hadn't felt in weeks. Mitchell poured himself coffee, stepped out into the night air. Stars above like 1,000 open eyes. wind gentle across his face. He looked toward the road, the same path that once brought him sorrow, then fear, then purpose. Buck limped beside him, muzzle gray, loyal as ever. "We did all right, didn't we?" Mitchell murmured. The hound wagged his tail. Inside, a girl sang softly. Another hummed. And the woman he never asked for, but always needed, stood behind the curtain, watching him like a prayer answered too late, but never forgotten. Mitchell smiled. The world didn't give them a place, so they carved one themselves, boot by boot, heart by heart. Spring deepened. Rain softened the hard ground. Flowers pushed through frostbitten soil like second chances. Junie planted seeds along the fence. Joel sketched birds on old scraps of wood. Mitchell built a chicken coop from leftover planks, every nail hammered like punctuation in a sentence only he could write. One afternoon, a small group came up the road, curious faces, mothers and fathers holding tired hands. A woman from town whispered, "We heard you help people." Mitchell said nothing, just opened the barn door. Inside was space, hay, warmth, firelight. Nora guided them in. Joel offered a child her blanket. Junie passed a piece of bread. Mitchell stood at the fence, watching it all. The man who once only spoke to the wind was now building something larger than any ranch. Not a shelter, not a church, a home. And the sign Nora painted above the barn read just one word: welcome. That evening, they added another boot to the mantle. The line kept growing. Rumors returned, as they always do. "He's collecting strays," some said. "He's building a cult," others muttered. But none of them knocked. They didn't dare. Not now. Mitchell had turned his land into a haven, quiet, safe, unspoken. No law passed could undo the good blooming there. Clyde Ferris came once, stood near the fence, but never crossed it. Mitchell stood opposite him, arms folded. "You can't save everybody," Clyde called. Mitchell replied, "Don't need to. Just the ones who show up." Clyde spat in the dirt and left. The girls watched from the window. Joel whispered, "Does he hate us?" Mitchell shook his head. "He just don't know how to love." That night, another lost mother arrived. The next week, an old man with no sons. Mitchell never asked their stories. He just offered what he had. His hands, his land, his silence. Every piece of wood carved, every soup shared, every child held. It wasn't charity. It was healing. One day, one soul at a time. The barn filled. The porch creaked under new boots. Nights glowed with lamplight, and the sound of stories told in circles. Joel drew chalk stars on the walls. Junie taught letters to a boy who'd never learned his name. Nora built shelves for blankets. Mitchell taught a woman how to hold an axe. He taught a man how to hammer, without trembling. They all brought something broken, but none of them stayed broken. And in the silence of midnight, when Mitchell sat alone, he would sometimes stare at the sky and wonder how close he'd come to saying no that first night. If he had, Joel might have frozen. Junie might have buried her voice forever. And he would still be sitting in a hollow house, carving birds with no wings. Instead, his world now beat with many hearts. And the sound, quiet as it was louder than anything he'd ever known. That night, a new carving appeared on the mantle, a star. The council never returned. Not officially, but Reverend Thatch wrote letters, blessing them in carefully chosen words. Nora read one aloud by lamplight. "A man who lifts others has already found his sermon," it said. Mitchell nodded, but didn't reply. Actions had always been his gospel. One stormy night, Buck passed quietly near the hearth. Joel cried for hours. Junie carved a small wooden paw and placed it beside the boots. Mitchell didn't speak for a full day, just sat where the dog once slept. That evening, Joel came to him, offering her hand. He stayed as long as he could, she said. Mitchell pulled her into his arms, holding grief with grace. They buried Buck beneath the big pine. Joel planted wildflowers over him. Junie placed a rock shaped like a heart on top. Mitchell placed his hat over his chest. "Good boy," he whispered. And just like that, even the saddest goodbye became another piece of the home they'd built together. Spring faded into golden summer. The creek ran high. Chickens wandered beyond the gate. Laughter filled every corner of the homestead. Mitchell built a swing from rope and pine. Joel squealed every time she flew past the porch. Junie, now taller, read entire pages aloud like she owned every word. Nora ran a comb through Mitchell's hair one evening as the sun painted the hills. "You ever think about how far we've come?" she asked. He chuckled. "Sometimes I forget where we started." "I don't," Joel piped up. "I remember that morning. My toes hurt. Mama was cold. But Mitchell's cabin had smoke." "It was your knocking that saved us," Junie said. Mitchell nodded. "You found me first." "No," Nora smiled, brushing his shoulder. "We found each other." That night, under starlight, they cooked stew for 12. New faces joined them. New hands shared stories. And Mitchell, once silent and alone, now told jokes that made children laugh. The cabin no longer held echoes. It held legacy. One evening, a rider arrived from the county. A younger man, clipboard in hand, tie crooked. He stepped off his horse, notebook trembling. "I'm here to inspect the situation," he said. Mitchell didn't bristle, just invited him in. The man expected chaos. Found order. He expected filth. Found children sweeping floors and meals served warm. He walked through the barn, jaw tight. Watched Joel teach a toddler how to tie her shoes. Saw Junie help an elder with a blanket. Mitchell waited by the door, arms crossed. "They all live here?" the man asked. "No," Mitchell replied. "They belong here." That night, the man left quietly. Said he'd write a report. Never did. Days passed. No one came. Nora sat beside Mitchell on the porch, sipping cider. "Think we scared him straight?" she asked. Mitchell shrugged. "Think we reminded him what people need." "And what's that?" "Not judgment. Just space to grow." She kissed his cheek. And under that dusty sky, nothing else was said. Joel grew bold. She rode ponies bareback and climbed trees Junie swore were too high. Junie grew patient, teaching letters to mothers and boys with shaking hands. Nora opened a garden, rows of greens and yellows curling toward the sun. Mitchell built a second cabin out back, one for those too broken to sleep near others. He carved a sign, "Mend." One night Joel asked, "Why'd you let us in?" Mitchell paused. "Because no one let me in once, and I remember how cold that felt." Junie whispered, "You saved us." "No," Mitchell replied. "You reminded me what my hands were for." "What's that?" "Holding, lifting, carving room for others." That night, Joel added a painted stone to Buck's grave. Junie tucked an old bonnet under her pillow. Nora curled beside Mitchell by the fire, her hand resting on his chest. The world beyond still spun cruel, but here was warmth. Every footstep, every name spoken, every laugh. It stitched the cabin tighter. 1 year passed. One full turn of seasons. The boots on the mantel had doubled. 10 now, each carved by Mitchell's hands. Joel grew taller, and Junie found her voice in writing. She sent letters to towns beyond, offering help, guidance, shelter. Strangers arrived with nothing and left with everything that mattered. Nora started a ledger, not of debts, but of names and stories. Mitchell built beds until his knuckles cracked. "This ain't a house anymore," Junie said one morning. "It's something bigger." Mitchell nodded. "A place the world forgot to build." That night, a storm rolled in, thunder shaking the glass. But inside, the fire burned strong. Joel stood at the window. "No one's out there, right?" "No," Mitchell said, walking over. "Just wind." But part of him looked anyway, just to be sure, because storms come and go. And when they do, you keep the fire lit, the porch clear, and your heart open, just in case someone's still trying to come home. They called it the Hollow Hearth. No sign. No rules. Just a porch light always on. Mitchell never bragged. Never preached. He just kept building. Hammering. Listening. Teaching boys to chop wood and girls to grip a hammer without apology. Joel painted every wall with stars. Junie started a book titled The Day We Knocked. One evening, a rider from town returned. A woman. Older. Familiar. She didn't speak, just handed Mitchell a small bundle. For them, she said. Inside 2 bonnets. Worn clean, stitched with care. Joel pressed her face to them, tears falling silent. They smell like Mama, she whispered. Mitchell didn't speak, just pulled her close. Junie placed the bonnets on the mantel, beside the boots, beside the birds, beside the heart. That night, Nora whispered, "Do you think she's watching?" Mitchell answered, "She ain't watching. She's resting, because you made it." Outside, snow returned like a psalm. Inside, the fire never burned out, and the door stayed unlocked always. Mitchell stood on the porch, gray in his beard now, Nora beside him, arms folded, eyes watching the horizon. Below them, laughter rose from the yard. Joel and Junie ran with children, not yet born the day they'd knocked on his door. Chickens darted through dust. Smoke curled from 5 chimneys. The original cabin still stood, strong, weathered, sacred. Mitchell turned the last carving in his hands. Not a boot, not a star, just a door, tiny, perfect, open. He stepped inside, placed it on the mantel. Junie noticed first. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Mitchell smiled. "It's yours." Joel hugged his waist. "Thank you for not sending us away." "Thank you," he said, voice catching, "for knocking." That night, as the wind danced over the roof and the fire hummed low, Mitchell sat in the rocker, not guarding, just resting. And when his eyes closed, there was no fear, because even if the world never fully understood him, his door had stayed open, and that was enough. Now that you've watched the full story, we'd really appreciate it if you could rate it out of 10 in the comments. Your thoughts help us improve and ensure we're bringing you the kind of storytelling you truly enjoy.